Hello, everybody. I'm going to start this video, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while, um, addressing this very common question about structural word inquiry. How does structural word inquiry address instruction of grapheme-phoneme correspondences? I think this is a topic that is widely misunderstood, especially to those new to structural word inquiry. And I decided I need to make some kind of a way of conveying how crucial grapheme-phoneme correspondences are in structured word inquiry and how explicitly we teach it from the very start. So I'll just dive in with an example that is a way this question is always asked me, but how would you teach the spelling of cat? So just picking this quintessential early word, and the question itself is signaling the misunderstanding as if there's some way in which, because it's just a base, that structured word inquiry doesn't know what to do. It's like, well, no, because grapheme-phoneme correspondences are essential from the beginning. And so of course we need to teach them. So I'll just dive in and give you an example. So let's say that this sentence is I was reading with a kid, and the child was reading, and for whatever reason they get to this word and they get stuck. So what might I do? Well, one thing I might actually do right from the start is say, well, can you spell that out for me? Which might seem like an odd request, but actually it's just a way of making sure that the kids even know the names of the letters. C-A-T. If they can go C-A-T, okay, I know they know the names of letters. And if they're not sure, then I know they don't know, and I get to spell it for them, C-A-T. And then I might say, well, do you know something that C often represents? And if they don't, I say, well, it often writes K. So can you say K? There you go. And this A often writes A. So we have K, A. And then this T, do you know what that can do? Oh, it's often writing T. So you have K, A, T, cat. So mom says she wants a cat. So she wants a new pet. So that might be one thing I could do. But I'd like to highlight how here, what if I change the sentence by one word? And let's say the sentence was, mom says she wants a chat. Now let's say that the kid gets here and either can't read this word or says cat by mistake. I might then say, well, could you spell that word for me? And it might be a little more clear here, because it might be that the kid who says cat by mistake, because they didn't know this word, once they ask them to spell it, by going CH, they can see that it's not just a C. And if they don't know how to spell it, say, oh, I spell that C-H-A-T. And I might have them to spell that C-H-A-T. And I said, well, do you know what the CH often does? And if they don't know, I tell them, well, main job it has is to write ch. Can you say ch? Okay. So you have ch, and then the A is for ch, and then the T is for t in this word. So we have ch, at, chat. So mom says she wants a chat. Do you know what a chat is? No. Oh, it's like a talk. So I should have even asked them, maybe I should have talked about what the sentence is about anyways. But the point is, of course we need to do this. But notice that when it's cat, I say spell it as a C-A-T. And if it's C-H-A-T, I'm signaling the C-H-A-T. I might do this tapping out as well to make sure that the kid is aware of something called a C-H. And I could even, so there's a digraph in here that might be the source of the confusion. I might even want to go to the side, hey, look at this word. How would you spell that word? It says, mom says she wants a chat. How would you spell that word? If they say S-H-E, I might go, but watch this. I would spell it S-H-E and get them to go S-H-E. Well, why do you say the S-H together? Well, this is the word she. What do you feel at the beginning? Sh. You write the sh with an S-H in this word. So just a signal of, it can be a quick little thing. It's help the kid read. I want them to know from the word cat that the C is a common way of writing k. The A for a, the T for t, they're very common. But I'm not saying the C is for k, because of course the C can do other things. And I'm just saying in the word cat, that's what we'd have. And then this contrast, so you can't always figure out a word from context. There's no way that you know what this is. If you don't know what a cat is, you don't know what a chat is, even if you pronounce it right, you don't know what you're talking about. So we've got to make sure that the meaning is there. But let's now take another thing that we might do if this idea of the question of cat came up, reading of cat, if I wanted to make a lesson around what I would argue are some of the very rich orthographic understandings available by studying not just the word cat, but what happens when you look at that word and you look at relatives and use it as a jumping off point to deepen understanding of the system. So since I can't use published literature that I don't own in a video, I've written a little silly story about with this picture of my friend's house on Wolf Island, who's always got cats and dogs hanging out. So what if let's say I had that chat with the class the other day with the word cat, and so I know that's in mind. So here's a little story, and I might read it like this with the kids. So here's the story. Here's the title: Friendly Cats and Dogs. And then I read it out loud and I'm following along, having the kids read along with me just in their heads. And then after I read through it, we'll come back and look at some things. So my friend takes care of many stray cats. I always see 2 or 3 walking around his house. If I look closely, there's often at least one shy cat hiding in a corner somewhere too. He also likes dogs. In this picture, we see that this dog and these cats are friends who are used to hanging out together. It's lovely to see cats and dogs play together nicely. So admittedly, a pretty silly little story, but it's a way to have a context to talk about some things. So if I said to the class, well, yesterday we were talking about the word cat in the story that we had, the C-A-T for cat. Does anybody see that word here? And now I'm just seeing if they can identify just that spelling. And if this is something on the wall or something, a kid might be able to come point to it, but I can help them. And there it is. So we have there's the spelling, C-A-T. This says, if I look closely, there is often at least one shy cat hiding in a corner somewhere too. Okay, so there's our word cat. But I'm wondering, I might say to the kids, did anybody notice another place where there's a C-A-T for cat, but it's actually a C-A-T with something else? And what I'm trying to get people to see is this word. It's also in the title, of course. But here we notice we have C-A-T for one shy cat. Here we have C-A-T-S for many cats. And so I'm bringing them to see that, oh, we have a base, C-A-T, and that's for the word cat. But I might put, that's a base, and if I have to teach this idea that every word you will encounter is either a base or a base with something fixed in front or after. And we'll get into all of that, and maybe we've already talked about it. But here we have a base, C-A-T, is just a word, but it doesn't have anything fixed to it. But I notice here that there's an S fixed at the end. So why is that S there? And then we can talk about, oh, this is for many cats. I wouldn't say many cat, because we English speakers already know that we put this S at the end if we mean more than one, and we write that in this case with an S. But that is only part of the story. So maybe we'll come over here and we see our base, C-A-T, for the word cat. But we notice that here we have C-A-T, and then we add an S. And then when we rewrite it, we get C-A-T-S. And so we get the kids to spell that out with me. Maybe we'll try it one more time. Everybody goes C-A-T-S. And I identify the fact that notice how I paused after the T where that plus sign is. And that's a habit we're going to get into when we work with word sums. We write them, we spell them out with these pauses to show where the structures are. So we said cat, but when we want more than one, we say cats. So we say S. And how do we write that that we use to mean more than one? We write it with an S. Okay. But here, notice what happens here. There was another sentence in the story that says, he also likes dogs. What do you think? Is dog a base or is it complex? I know what a dog is, and that's just spelled D-O-G. And I could talk about the phonology there again. We say dog, which you feel at the beginning, and then we have the O for ah and the G for g, dog. So we have dog. But I don't say he also liked dog, because he doesn't just like one dog, he likes dogs in general. So now I might get you to say dog, and I'll say dogs. And when you say dogs, I might get the kids to put their hands really tightly on their vocal cords. So they say dogs and hold on to the end. Dogs. You feel that Z and you're feeling your vocal cords vibrate. Now say cat and cats. And you notice that your vocal cords don't vibrate when you add this in cats, but it does in the z in dogs. So we're seeing and feeling the difference between the s and the z that we say. But what's interesting is when we have more than one dog, again, we add the s. And why do we add the s? And we're starting to get the idea that this s is a special thing called a suffix, and it can be used for more than one. So now we know that the S, the grapheme, I use these angle brackets, and I teach these symbols right very early. So we can talk about angle brackets, what's inside. We always call by the letter name. But if we have slash brackets, it's not about the letters, or the graphemes or whatever. It's not about they're not letters inside these slash brackets. What they are is representing pronunciations, phonemes. So this is a s phoneme. And we talk about the word phone and telephone and phonemes. And here we have grapheme. We talk about graph and geography and graphite, the stuff in a pencil, and a graph on the wall. We get to the idea. And I could pull up my dictionary, look at the word graph, and see it goes back to Greek graphos. And actually, I would even take it farther than writing and talk about writing or mark that we see in other sources, so that the graphemes are the things that you write, the marks you put on the page. The phonemes are the things you hear, the things that you say. So the S grapheme is a way of writing S. And it's so valuable to have these concrete representations of these abstract things, I'm going to argue. So we see that we have cats and dogs. The S is writing S in cats, but the S is writing Z in dogs. And now we can see, well, that's interesting. We probably know that there's another grapheme that can write Z, and that's the letter Z or Z. And we see that in words like zoo and zebra. So if I feel that Z, how do I know if I use the S or the Z? Well, when we're adding this S at the end of a word, when it's a suffix that we're using for more than one, it doesn't matter if the S suffix is pronounced S or Z. We always use the S suffix. There isn't a Z suffix. So there's one way that we can see, we can start from the word cat, look at this plural, we're getting the idea of bases and suffixes, we'll get to prefixes, and we can see that, there's one key concept about grapheme-phoneme correspondences that I'm planting here. Most graphemes write more than one phoneme, and most phonemes can be written by more than one grapheme. And I'm just giving a little signal that that's a part of what we're going to expect. But the good news is that there's always a reason. We might not always know what it is, but here's a nice place with the S suffix to see that if I'm using a S or a Z at the end of a word to signal more than one, it's going to be the S. There's no Z. So that's a good little thing. But what else could we do with that? So let's say we did the first lesson and a second kind of lesson. Now we might say, we actually come back to the same text, because we started with the word cat. So why don't we take a little look at the C grapheme, and we can see that the C in the word cat is writing the phoneme K. Okay, well, that's a common thing that the C can do. So maybe I just want to get kids getting used to finding letters in text. So I need some of these kids may just need to get familiar with finding the letter C. So they can let's say they photocopy this page, and kids are looking for the C's, and they start circling the C's. And when they do that, they can try to read the words. I'll read some of them with them. I might do this all together, but see if they can find those C's on their own. So here, this is the word, my friend takes care of many stray cats. If I look closely, so we're seeing that C writing K over and over again. But there's something interesting that happens. I've circled all the C's here. One of the C's is doing something different. This is the word nicely. It's not nikely. So lovely to see dogs and cats and dogs play together nicely. Well, say nicely. What do you feel when you get to that C? You feel S. Well, that's interesting. So now we know that not only can the S write more than one phoneme, the C can write more than one phoneme. It certainly frequently writes the K, but it can also write S. And we'll learn what the conventions are when it does that. But for now, we need to know that the C can do this. And that's why I don't say C is for K, because it might not be. I say in cat, so in cat, we need a C for the K. And one thing the C can do is write K. And we have all this language that I don't have to load everything on them at once, but I do like the fact that this page of text happened to have a C doing something different. So now when I run to the word city or pencil or something, I've primed you to notice the C can do that as well. So now let's get back to our S, which we learned the S grapheme is a way of writing S or Z. We discovered that by looking at the word cats and dogs. So I have these symbols for the S grapheme, the phoneme, the Z phoneme, the Z phoneme, sorry. And so we can say, well, what if we start to categorize these things? So the word cats, we felt this at the end. So the S was writing this phoneme, where dogs was writing the Z phoneme. And then we could go through this thing and look for words that have an S and see what they do. So here's the word take. I get takes. So takes, I feel that S at the end. So that's going to be a word that goes in here. So I'll take my takes and maybe put it in here. And then if I come down farther, I notice, oh, there's the word his, there's an S. When I get to the word his, we say it, his, hold on, in this case, we have the word his is using the S for Z. So we're testing this in all these words. Of course, I have to make sure the kids know the words and we work on it together or whatever. Now, I've gone here and boxed every letter S in the page as to sort. Now it's a whole pile of words, so it takes some time. But here's the words that we found. And as we sort them, again, we're reading these words, so they're getting all this practice. This is in the context of a little story we've read and done over times. So they're already familiar with these words by the time we're doing this activity. And of course, if the kids are too young or don't know enough to do this on their own, this is a little small group activity. We get to choose how we do that. But notice when we organize all these, we notice that there's been something interesting. All those words can be sorted, but one of the words that had an S letter doesn't have an S grapheme. And so the instruction was to box every letter. This was a chart for graphemes. And so I'm signaling now a very subtle thing that becomes hugely valuable over time, the difference between letters and graphemes. So the word shy does have the letter S, but it has the digraph SH. So this is SHY, and I might get everybody to spell that out, SHY. Okay, so say shy. What do you feel at the beginning of shy? You feel sh, okay? And how do you write this sh in shy? With the SH. And by having this motor movement as you announce the graphemes, whether they're digraphs or trigraphs or single letter graphemes, I'm getting you to really focus on that group as a thing. Now, it doesn't matter that there's the letter S in the digraph SH. This is not for the letter words with the letter S. This is words where we use an S grapheme for S or Z and maybe some other things. But SH is a different thing. So that's a nice little thing that we can do. So now we got an SH digraph that writes the sh like in shy. So what I want to do for now is why don't we kind of review the concepts that we've just been talking about here. So how does SWI address these grapheme-phoneme correspondences? I hope that this video is just a little introduction to the fact that it is absolutely explicit and rigorous from the beginning. The principle of structured word inquiry is that we should be teaching how our best understanding of how the English spelling system works. And grapheme-phoneme correspondences are a non-negotiable, necessary thing that we teach right from the beginning. It's absolutely crucial. And I really want to talk about this idea of explicit and rigorous. Notice how we were using these concrete representations of graphemes and phonemes to make them explicit. And to be rigorous about the use, I try never to say letters right and sounds. I talk about graphemes and phonemes. I might even just say, as I did with cat before I even introduced the term grapheme, I said, what do you usually use the C for? I didn't say letter. I didn't say grapheme yet, but it won't take long before I start talking about that difference. But having a physical representation for those, for what is the grapheme and what is the phoneme, is super helpful. I need a way to signal what are the phonemes, and so we saw that. But we also did it in the context of real words in a meaningful context. So we knew that the S suffix in cats and dogs has a meaningful purpose. And in all of these words, these were words that we were talking about, that we were familiar with, and we could see the different jobs of these graphemes. Making the phonemes physical. The phonemes and graphemes are so abstract that how does it feel, the difference between this and the z, and what do you feel at the beginning of sha? You feel the sh, and then writing, and then figuring out how you write them. But that's another way that we're absolutely explicit. And then this idea of linking to the motor memories of spelling out and this tapping out. So there's an SHY and a CAT, and we're making sure that you're identifying those structures as explicitly. And then and here was another thing of sorting. Once we've encountered some text, now we look for the S graphemes that do different things. And then we get to this idea of graphemes, the S, but you might have a 2-letter team, a digraph, and the letter S, and how letters aren't the same as graphemes, and we're going to learn more about that. Of course, this is very early going, but we're already, our instruction is already guided by this knowledge, so that we avoid sending signals that we later have to unteach. So, of course, is also right from the beginning of formal instruction, where it's especially important. Of course, you need to know the grapheme-phoneme correspondence from the start. And there's this regular ongoing practice, this spelling out loud and tapping out loud. I have lots of resources for. I'll put some links in the description of the video. Is something I'm explicit about from the very beginning. That I want teachers to work at identifying the graphemes and markers in the base and announcing the affixes quickly. But you don't get any instruction from Structured Word Inquirer from me that is giving any signal. The grapheme-phoneme correspondence are important. I point to resources on it all the time. And this motor memory cues is a really valuable way to do it. Using multiple memory roots for building those representations, and trying to build familiarity with single letter graphemes, digraphs, and trigraphs. And it's really important that we do this instruction is always guided by awareness of morphological and etymological influence, which constrain phoneme grapheme choice. So in terms of the main example we had with that in this story was just the S grapheme can write, the S, when it's a suffix, the S grapheme in that S suffix can write S or Z. And that we know that if we say Z, and we're adding that pronunciation at the end of a base or a word to mean more than one, we're going to always use the S, whether it's S or Z. So it's planting another seed that's so important. Not only do we have kids understand that most graphemes you run into will have more than one job, and that's fine. And here we see, but there's a signal that there's a way to understand why. If the only clue I have is S is for snake and Z is for zoo, then it's very logical to put a Z at the end of dogs. So I want to encounter these kinds of questions from the start. So that's just a little total early touch at this work. I'm going to do some other videos, actually some from this same text, but then I have some other examples I want to share of lessons that I do with a deep orthographic phonology focus. And I think I have some videos that I might be able to share with kids working with this, but that's for next time. Hope this was helpful. Cheers.